Good evening, Mayor, members of the commission, and community members. Craig Owens, I am pleased to be here tonight to present the 2025 operating and capital budget. This budget process, as it is each year, is a team effort, and I want to acknowledge that this had a lot of people's contribution from our team, not only Allie Porter as our budget manager, who you'll be hearing from, but also our executive team, which is the leadership of the organization, part of the leadership of the organization. And I appreciate that they came together to not only build a lot of different scenarios and test a lot of scenarios, but put a lot of data in here. And so we say values-driven and data-driven. These were critical pieces to what drove our budget discussions and the presentation of this budget tonight. We're going to talk a lot tonight about challenges, and there's really no way around that. But I'd like to put into the conversation up front, and hopefully throughout the summer as we adjust this budget, that we are continuing to do really amazing things. What we have left, if we don't just talk about loss, is delivering some remarkable services to a community that has expressed its need, desire, and wishes to have these levels of service. And we have great people throughout this organization who deliver this service consistently. And so the program and the plan that we're going to lay out tonight in a very high-level way still continues a proud tradition of service. It continues a high level of service throughout the departments, even those that we're proposing reductions in. So I want to put that positive note into it, and then I know we're going to be talking about where are we making changes to meet the challenges that our community faces and that this organization faces financially. So about those, there's a high expectation for services. We've funded those consistently over time. We have really two basic revenue sources, and that is sales tax and property tax. And the reality strikes us that the revenues are growing much slower than our expense centers are. And so we'll go through that, and that's a reality that you'll see in our presentation tonight. We have also used the listening tools that we've developed the last 2 years, and in particular this year, the Balancing Act tool, which puts everybody in the boat together, that if you want something more, you've got to find a way to pay for it. If you don't want to pay as much, you got to find a way to cut something. And that's the reality that this budget is contextualized in. It's a reality I've faced in every budget in my career, and one that you share with me ultimately by making a budget decision here in a few weeks after we've heard from the public and made it right. So we appreciate that tool because it did allow us to understand a little bit better what those priorities of the community were, where their top priorities were, where they saw things that could be potentially reduced, and where they wanted to see increases in those services. So we think it's a good tool. We'd like to have even more people participate in the future, but it was what helped guide us in making some of the decisions for this. I also want to say that this is a plan, and there's thousands of plans that are possible. So I look forward to making the adjustments, hearing from people, making those adjustments, but adjustments with the reality that we've got to rebalance everything and come out with a balanced budget in the end. So the four things that we focused on and that we believe this budget delivers are a continued investment in our infrastructure improvements. We have invested deeply in our physical infrastructure in this community. The CIP plan, which you saw the other night, it continues. It's a 5-year plan. It continues our investment in above ground and underground infrastructure in the facilities that we rely on to keep clean drinking water, to move people around their community, the buildings and facilities where the work happens, and the buildings and facilities where our public enjoys services. Those infrastructure improvements over the last 4 years have been our main story. They have been where we've put our resources, and we will continue to invest. We've continued, and this relies on retaining market competitive pay. So we made an adjustment 3 years ago. We began it. In the last 2 years, we invested deeply into correcting where we were behind market in our pay structures. That isn't a one-time thing. That's a thing that continues with us. We're committed to it, and we've continued to invest in it. That's a reality that is in our financial picture, and this budget continues that. We looked at funding, and we looked at the CIP a few weeks ago. We looked at funding the construction of new fire stations. We needed to have a viable plan to staff those stations. That's what I was asked to do. That's what this budget does. It's a viable plan to prepare for the staffing of 2 new fire stations and that expansion. And the other thing that this does is we've built a lot of capacity through a lot of hard work, through some trial and error, and a lot of community participation to address our investments in affordable housing and address homelessness and those that are suffering from homelessness in our community. We've built those systems. We built those largely over the last few years with federal assistance, with ARPA dollars, with federal assistance. We have come to the end of the federal assistance, and we have built that capacity to sustain the needs that we know will be here for the next few years until we build up our affordable housing stock. So this continues that plan and that investment, but this time it identifies local dollars to do that work and carves them out of our existing capacity. Those 4 things drove much of our budget decision making. I've already talked a little bit about Balancing Act. It's a new feature. It's one we will continue to use, and we hope that more people will participate in the early stages. But it did suggest that there were some things that we wanted to see yet increased, and those were continued police patrol. We wanted to see ADA compliance. We wanted to see street maintenance improvements, and we wanted to see code compliance. Those are 4 program areas where we tried to figure out, even though we were looking at reductions in some areas, we tried to find ways that we could put more resources towards those top priorities. You're going to hear from a number of our staff, or the leaders in these departments. You also hear from our budget manager, and at the end we'll conclude, and then of course begin the listening and the question and answer, which will continue until the budget is concluded, which I believe is scheduled for September 3rd, is the final vote on that budget. I'll turn it over to Allie Porter.
Good evening, Commission. Allie Porter, I'm the budget manager. Before we go into where we want to go with the 2025 proposed budget, it's important to understand where we currently are. And one big driver that has led to our current situation, perhaps the biggest driver, is sales tax collections. Before I go into some analysis, it is important to recognize that there is a 2-month lag in receiving sales tax reports. So we didn't even know officially how we ended 2023 until the end of February 2024. So that makes obviously projecting very difficult every year as we go through the process. Per this chart, you can see in 2021 and 2022, we were having substantial increases in sales tax post-pandemic. And by the time when we were developing the 2024 budget in the spring of 2023, all indications were that that trend was going to continue. So we revised our 2023 budget at an even higher number than the adopted budget, and then built an 8% increase on top of that for 2024. After the budget was adopted in September, we received reports that collections made months prior were not meeting those new, more aggressive projections. So we have since updated our projections that you see here. 2023, we ended up, these are actuals, 51.9 compared to what we had projected of 56.9. We're currently projecting ending 2024 at 53.4 compared to an adopted budget of 61.6. And then again, you see that 3% growth into the 2025 budget. So this trend is relatively similar to the trend that you saw pre-pandemic.
Maybe.
I'm sure this is a chart that many of you have seen before, but it really just illustrates that the city receives approximately 25% of property taxes, along with the school district at 40%, the county at 35%, and then the state at 1%. And then here are our budget options that we explored for the proposed budget. Obviously, there are 100 different iterations that we could have came up with, but these were the 4 that really bubbled to the top. So that flat mill levy in combination with that less than projected sales tax revenue resulted in some pretty substantial reductions, including 3-person staffing at LDCFM with no expansion, substantial reductions in other areas, including patrol, parks and recreation, street maintenance, etc. We also would have utilized one-time measures to balance. So we do have different funds with limited amount of dollars that we can move money from one fund to another, but once that's spent, it's gone. And so it would have been a one-time thing, kind of kicking the can down the road for future years. And then there would be no long-term sustainability, no plan to get us back to fund balance policy requirement. And I think these past few years between COVID and what you are going to see in this budget and what we project in 2025, that fund balance requirement is important because we are going to, by all projections, dip into that over the next 2 years. The 3.5 mil increase, this is our city manager's recommended budget. So it has the 3-person staffing at LDCFM, but includes 2 expansion stations. It continues those reductions in other areas, but has some restorations for the police department. And then we don't utilize those one-time measures. So we have a separate small mill levy increases to support ongoing expenditures for needed equipment, as well as a plan to get us back to our fund balance policy requirement. Option 3 is approximately 5.7 mils. It's 4-person staffing with 2 expansion stations is your difference there. And then option 4 is all of the above and makes some of those restorations in other areas, including parks and recreation. I do want to note that as we were reviewing the slides, we saw an error in option 4. So a previous published version had that the apparatus would not be cross-staffed, and that is not accurate. This option 4 at 8.3 mils still includes a cross-staffed apparatus.
Hey, Allie, can you hold on a second?
Yep.
Can I ask everybody out there, especially in the gallery back there, we can still hear you, so if you could go ahead and refrain from your comments until the presentation is done, and then you can go ahead and give your comments up here. I'd really appreciate it. Additionally, if you could go ahead and take the signs down as well. I've been informed by our officers that it makes it a little bit harder to go ahead and see everybody. You can hold them, but the signs taped to the window, if you could go ahead and take them down, I'd really appreciate it as well. Continue, Allie.
Thank you. So how to calculate your tax bill, we wanted to show how this would impact our taxpayers, this 3.5 mils. So our median value of a home in 2022 was $247,000. And so you multiply that by 11.5%, and that gives you your assessed valuation. And then you multiply that assessed valuation by the 2 different mill rates. And then divide by 1,000. So if we were to have a flat mill rate, the estimated tax bill is $944 a year compared to $1,044 under this 36.707 proposed mill rate. Last thing before you hear from some of our departments, finance is going to be back in front of you. Sorry, I hear my own echo. Next Tuesday, by state law, we are required to notify the county clerk of our intention to exceed the revenue neutral rate. And at that time, we will share a proposed rate. whatever proposed rate that is, we can go down, but we cannot go up. So we need some guidance from the commission on what you want to see on the 16th that we can then share with the county by July 20th. Again, that's a state statutory deadline.
Go ahead, Oslam. It didn't wait. Thanks for safety's best. Yeah, just that. Good.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Lawrence Douglas County Fire Chief Rich Llewellyn. Here to present a couple slides about the recommended budget for next year. One focus on this budget is improving community-wide response coverage, and that includes identifying areas where we need additional coverage. This work's been ongoing. It predates me. We have identified areas where we need additional coverage, particularly in the south and northwest parts of Lawrence. Additionally, there's an area in the northern part of Lawrence that we've covered or discussed. Station 3 is identified as likely to be moved into that area. Station 3 is approaching 60 years old. It'll be 60 years old in 2016, and it is time to talk about replacing that. This is largely driven by population expansion, by expansion of Lawrence's footprint. I've told by retirees who started at Station 3 in 1966 that was the edge of town, and it's well inside the city limits now, as you can see on the map, and it is time for us to talk about expanding the footprint of the fire department to match the city limits. With the increasing population comes increasing calls. Where there's people, there's risk. People cause fires, people have medical incidents, and we respond to those. We have difficulty getting to those addresses in a timely manner. We're experiencing difficulty with resource availability as we have more calls and folks are headed out to other calls and having to respond from further away. One of the highlights of this recommended budget is the creation of another medic unit. It will be the 8th medic unit in our system, and it'll be moved to Station 6 when Station 6 is opened, as we're proposing. But additionally, it'll be or initially be housed at one of our existing facilities. So as we talk about community-wide response coverage and getting 8 medic units into service, we need to talk about planning for the future as well, and getting the team into place that can build the stations that can help the people who are going to be coming onto the department as we plan out through 2030. That can frankly build this budget, which is a challenge as we bounce from governance group to governance group and back and forth. So those are the 2 deputy chiefs, a human resource analyst and a budget analyst that we've been asking for quite some time. I have a letter that was sent to me by a previous fire chief who was asking for a deputy chief, and the reasons are the same. We need additional leadership in the department who can focus on building towards the future. Included in this budget, as city manager noted, is a plan to expand the department to add a Station 6 and a Station 7, and well, it's not in the CIP, but they're looking forward, talking about rebuilding Station 3 in the future. And as we expand the department's footprint, we anticipate being able to respond in a more timely manner to incidents throughout the community. A new station in the south part of town or a new station in the northwest part of town doesn't just respond to that area, it responds into other areas. So if Station 2 in East Lawrence is out, a station in the south part of town might be the fastest one to get there as it comes across the southern border. So these stations are not just serving the areas where they're built, they're serving the entire community. These are a lot of the factors that we looked at as we identified where stations are needed. Population density, disadvantaged populations, historical response performance, and population projections are big. Growth projections are big. I see a lot of activity on the other side of K10, up west, as you drive west on 6th Street. We're going to have difficulty getting there from our existing infrastructure. We need to expand our footprint so we can get to these incidents in a timely manner. Imagine, if you will, choking. If you were to choke and you lived out in that area or you were recreating, it might take a long time for one of our resources to get out there. So we have to expand our footprint. We're here to talk about the difficult subject of reducing service level as well. This is personally and professionally challenging me to be here to talk about this. Moving from 4-person staffing to 3-person staffing is included in this budget. We're looking at, in year 2025, reducing our minimum daily staffing from 39 to 36, and that's accomplished by reducing staffing on 5 of our suppression apparatus, and we add in 2 of those positions on a medic unit. So the net effect is a loss of 3 in our minimum staffing. The proposal for looking ahead in 2028, when Station 6 opens, our minimum staffing be 37. One of those resources that's currently at Station 5 as a double unit will be moving to Station 6, and the medic unit, the extra medic unit, Medic 6, will be also moving to Station 6. Planning ahead to 2030, we anticipate the opening of Station 7, the hiring of 20 new expansion positions to staff Station 7. That's 5 people per shift times the relief factor of 1.3 that is based on our historical averages. We continue to look at that, but that's based on leave factors that's used, vacation, parental time, sick leave, all of those factors that the average firefighter, if you will, uses over a year, gives us that relief factor of 1.3. So when we look at needing 15 people to fill the 5 spots times 3 shifts, we add in that relief factor, it brings us to 20. So in 2030, we're looking at expanding the footprint by 20 firefighters. We're looking at having a minimum daily staffing of 42, so it would be 3 above where our minimum daily staffing is currently, and we would have facilities more evenly distributed throughout the community. Thank you.
When
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Melissa Sieben, Director of Municipal Services and Operations for the City of Lawrence. Tonight, I'm going to go through sort of how we're prioritizing the work for 2025 in the budget as it's being presented tonight. Maintenance of existing assets or infrastructure has been a key focus, as the city manager noted, for the last several years. The goal here is to drive towards the lowest cost of ownership for this community of its roadway networks, water infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure, and its facilities. At the same time, we're trying to improve safety and accessibility with our ADA programs, and also sustainability in addition to all of that. So it's a lot of competing priorities in addition to the standard regulatory compliance, which we often are here talking to you about. So our plan for this budget, it's fairly straightforward. What we are bringing to you tonight is increasing that investment in street maintenance within our neighborhoods. You've seen a lot of arterial work, our main streets being worked on over the last year or two, maybe 3 or 4, depending on where you live in town. You will start to see us moving more into the neighborhoods, which is something that we hear a lot of feedback on. Also investment in the sidewalk network and also our facilities as it relates to ADA. We were here last month talking about that and the importance of that work to the community. Investment in our water, wastewater infrastructure, for regulatory compliance primarily, but also for continuing to serve our community into the future, and safety training as well as compensation as noted by the city manager. Here's a graphic which I think helps display sort of the efforts that this body and those that have come before it have worked on over the last number of years since 2020. And it's really, there was a little dip in 21 with COVID and kind of all the things that we were all dealing with there, but you can see the continued drive on working on capital improvements throughout the community, whether that's a new aquatic center, or it is a new neighborhood street, or fixing stormwater issues throughout the community. That's what this is showing you as a major investment. We also are working on driving our key performance indicators from the strategic plan. Things like our fleet transition plan, which will be moving forward here shortly, our sustainable capital projects plan that we put forward and was approved here in the last year, and our stormwater design criteria. I think the last couple of weeks, we've all had a few contacts on that, and I think it's something that the community is desperately looking for us to solve. And we'll also continue the focus on our fiscal stewardship and efficient, effective processes. As I noted earlier, we want to drive towards that lowest cost of ownership, and the items here are definitely positioning us better for grants and lowest cost of ownership over time. And then, of course, from an equity inclusion perspective, that is the ADA transition plan for facilities and rights-of-way, and also the Vision Zero Safety Action Plan that we are currently working on with the community to reduce the number of fatality and injury accidents in our community related to transportation. And we'll continue to work on our bricks and street sidewalk policies that we've been engaging the community on. And then, of course, our investment in our future operations center for municipal services. And that's all I have, and I'm going to turn it over now to Parks. Louise.
Dollars.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm Luis Ruiz, Director of Parks and Recreation, Art and Culture. And I'm here today to talk about some of the reductions that we have come up with in order to meet the critical economic reality of next coming year. Being here only 60 days, it's not where I want to be, but I do understand the reality of it, and have worked with staff in order to come up with some ideas that we feel are the least impactful and strategic at this moment, to be able to meet the requirements of the reductions that we were asked to come up with. Now, with that being said, we are still fully committed to providing experiences for residents and visitors with our parks, our recreational facilities, our arts and culture, and with the upcoming comp plan that we hope to bring to you in September. We want to make sure that we honor a lot of the recommendations on there, with the understanding that some of these are going to have to be very strategic in nature in order for us to be able to meet some of those recommendations in light of what we're looking at right now. So in essence, we're looking at reducing two major areas. One is full-time staff, vacant positions. Another one is part-time staff, and the third is operating expenses. And pretty much this is across the board on non-revenue generating or either break even or losing money. And in those instances where we're making money, we had proposed some, but it didn't really make any sense to continue to do that because we'd have a net loss after the fact. So we're looking at some of those programs that or times of use that will be data driven when we get down to the details about when would be appropriate to instill some of these reductions. So again, we're looking at a reduction of $660,000. Staffing reductions between full-time and part-time, it's about approximately $456,000, with another $204,000 in reductions in operating and maintenance budgets. So let me go down what some of those impacts that will be felt and seen would be. So as far as reducing part-time hours, we do rely heavily as Parks and Recreation on part-time staff. That's in our facilities, both indoor, outdoor, aquatic center, our parks for our programs, as well as for landscape maintenance throughout the city. So in some of these cases, by reducing some of our part-time staff, that will also necessitate the reduction of hours that our facilities are open. So that would extend to the Sports Pavilion, East Lawrence Rec Center, Holcomb, and the community building. Again, we will analyze this very closely to see what those optimal times would be for reductions, where there's the least amount of impact to the community and to its users, but it will be necessary in order for us to cut the budget in the appropriate ways. So one of the impacts that might be, as we see, is that we are closing down sometime during the day in some facilities, and they may vary from day to day, from facility to facility, based on the use. But that's typically the time when there's free play. We normally have programming in the morning, programming's in the evenings, tournaments on the weekends, activities that generate some revenue for the city and help us offset some of our costs. So we're looking at those things that aren't necessarily doing that at this point. Again, trying to be strategic with the least amount of impact to the community as we make those decisions sometime down the line here. Other reductions in part-time hours, as I mentioned, we rely heavily on part-time to maintain our right-of-ways beautified as far as landscape. So some of that will have to be eliminated or reduced. And so that would impact some of our annual plantings, some of the roundabouts, the looks of the roundabouts, converting some to turf rather than something we need to maintain year-round. And then, for instance, a cemetery, we're looking, instead of trimming around the upright headstones 5 times a year, maybe doing that, or a season, maybe doing that 2 or 3 times. So again, some noticeable differences. Obviously, parks are still going to be there, things of that nature, but visually, there will be some sort of impact, and we're in full understanding of that impact. And again, the aquatic center with part-time, we depend heavily on part-time during the outdoor pool season as well as indoor. And so reduction in part-time may mean reduction in hours or shortening the season for the outdoor pool. Full-time positions, we've identified 3 positions. 2 are currently vacant in recreation. And actually, 2 are currently vacant, 1 in recreation, 1 in park maintenance. The other one is a promotion that we're seeking to do. So being very cautious and about not eliminating any positions, we're looking at some promotions and then as well as eliminating some vacant positions. But there will be impacts along with this as well. Since 2 of these programs are in recreation programming, we may see some reduction in some programming options, facility oversight, depending on how the promotion works, what position that is, there may be different impacts. And then the third, of course, being park maintenance. We have some parks that this position specifically is taken care of on the west side of town. So it will necessitate, in order for us to continue to do some of the maintenance that we do, for instance, at the new police station, the transit station, the Wakarusa roundabout that's being finished now. In order to maintain those, we're going to have to eliminate some of the things on the west side that this position currently takes care of, and that includes closing, the east end of the Clinton Outlet Park and Martin Park. And then finally, as I mentioned, we're also reducing some of our operating and budget and operating and maintenance budget. So the big impacts that this is going to have is we have identified several, and the list is on here. Amenities that we currently have in parks, mostly neighborhood parks, but not only, that are within the next 4 or 5 years need to be removed. In our plan, we have a line item of $150,000 a year to replace about one, depending on what amenity we're replacing, 1 or 2 parks per year. So this is a long-term elimination of that. The list here doesn't mean that this year this will happen. It just means over the next foreseeable future, as these become in disrepair or they're all outdated at this point. They're not all accessible for ADA. So these are ones that we've identified that will need to be replaced in the short term. So we're talking about removing these and not replacing them at these times. So there will be impact at that level. Eagle Bend Golf Course, we were talking, and I think I forgot to mention this earlier, one of the impacts of eliminating part-time is reducing concession hours and the pro shop hours. The golf course will continue to function as it does for golfing, but some of those services that are manned by part-time hours may be reduced. And then Eagle Bend, we're looking at less water use and less chemical supplies, so less watering of the rough areas. I guess as far as chemicals are concerned, is weed control and keeping the grounds in the shape that they're in today. And then finally, Prairie Park Nature Park, we're looking at Prairie Park Nature Center, we're looking at reducing some of the cost of feed and some other supplies. Which eventually, if the cuts are sufficient enough that we're not able to maintain, the animals that we're currently keeping there, we'll be looking to rehome some of those. So that, in a nutshell, is how we're looking at doing this right now. Again, the final decisions haven't been made. When the time comes, we will make sure that we're using the data, attendance, interest, surveys, whatever we can in order to make the biggest impact on our budget without impacting our community. So, okay, thank you.
Evening, Jason Novotny, the Police Department Budget Analyst, and I will be talking and walking you through our budget reduction process that we followed for 2025. We focused on our purpose-driven policing philosophy to guide us this year for the 2025 budget. And the 3 things we wanted to ensure the citizens of Lawrence, that ensuring our response to our high priority calls. So those are our 1, 2, and 3. Those are our in-progress calls. Those are our high-level felony calls where something is actively occurring and needs immediate attention. We wanted to continue providing coverage for events that have high volume. We have a lot of those in Lawrence, being a college town. So when there's high numbers of concentrations of people with the potential for active shooter events or any other criminal activity, we want to make sure we've got staffing for those type of events. And thirdly, adjusting the school resource officers from the Office of the Chief to patrol to reflect the feedback that the community gave in Balancing Act. The key services that are included are our downtown foot patrol. So we have 2 dedicated patrol officers downtown now, which many of you probably have seen walking the streets of downtown, meeting with business owners, meeting with as many citizens and people that they can meet down there. So that has been a really good positive thing for the downtown district, providing that feeling of safety and security down there. Some of the budget reductions and key service reductions that we looked at were the elimination of 2 positions that will be vacated later this year. We have 2 individuals who were recently accepted into our police academy, so we're excited to help further their career goals. But it leaves those 2 positions vacated, and the recommendation was to eliminate the community service technician, which is a unarmed report taker position, and a non-sworn investigator in our special victims unit. And positions that would go unfilled is our mental health co-responder.
Yes.
The key outcomes, again, using our purpose-driven policing model for patrol and investigations, we believe we can manage these service level reductions by changing the expectations of the public. With the addition of online reporting, ClickFix is now live with an emphasis on directing, the public to use this as a reporting method, to not utilizing an officer for those very low level crimes such as criminal damage to property, theft, and those type of things. We believe we can manage this change in service. And in summary, managing our workload with the purpose-driven policing philosophy and communicating with the public and internally will give us the ability to police our community in a manner that will help all people feel safe and secure in Lawrence. I think it's Misty is next.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the Homeless Solutions Division's budget. I'm pleased to share the significant progress we've made and outline our goals and hopes for the upcoming year. With our 2024 budget, we have completed or will have completed several key projects by the end of the year, aligning with the goals set in our strategic plan, A Place for Everyone. We sustained current sheltering capacity for 125 individuals and plan to enhance to shelter 175 to 200 individuals at the Lawrence Community Shelter, providing crucial safety net for those in immediate need of housing. We maintained the capacity to shelter 50 individuals at the Village, ensuring stable emergency shelter and wraparound supports for some of our most vulnerable community members. We established effective winter emergency sheltering in collaboration with our community partners. This initiative ensures that no one is left out in the cold during the harsh winter months. We secured a robust contract for case management with Burton Ash. This partnership enhances the support available to individuals, helping them to navigate the path from homelessness to stability. Our coordinated wraparound outreach includes substance use treatment connection, collaboration with the Lawrence Police Department, assistance with connections to benefits, harm reduction strategies, and more. We're also working on a way to add medical care to finish building out the team. This comprehensive approach addresses the diverse needs of the homeless population. We're working on a way to support the expansion of service hours at the Homeless Resource Center as well. The Homeless Resource Center provides a safe place for individuals to access resources, connect with service providers housed at the Homeless Resource Center, and take steps towards recovering from their homelessness. These accomplishments are significant milestones as identified in A Place for Everyone, our strategic plan to end chronic homelessness in our community. I would also like to note that by the close of 2024, we will have achieved 3 of the 5 major goals set for emergency sheltering in A Place for Everyone strategic plan. Over the past 2 years, we've benefited from federal COVID-19 relief funds as we developed emergency sheltering services to meet the need in our community. The funds helped develop capacity at LCS, build the Village, and provide other sheltering services. Those funds will be spent down by year-end 2024 as required by the federal government. This slide provides an overview of the proposed 2025 Homeless Solutions budget by fund. The total 2025 budget reflects a $451,000 decrease compared to 2024. As mentioned before, the proposal includes an increase in the affordable housing sales tax from 0.05 to 0.1%. This increase is crucial to simply sustain the progress we made to address homelessness in our community in 2024. It does not allow for any service enhancements. Our estimated revenue, if approved, the proposed increase is expected to generate an additional $2.5 million for affordable housing and homeless solutions. The fund allocation, the revenue would be available for both affordable housing and emergency sheltering commitments the city has made in A Place for Everyone. Currently, the 0.05 sales tax is used to fund affordable housing development. This proposal seeks to balance the allocation and also address immediate and critical needs for the homeless solutions. This increase in sales tax is essential for maintaining the progress we have made and ensuring that we can continue to provide the necessary services to our community members in need. New sales tax funds used by Homeless Solutions would go towards contract expenditures for emergency sheltering capacity and for approximately 200 individuals and related supportive services such as case management and rehousing for community members experiencing homelessness. It's important to note that the 2025 budget does not fund several critical initiatives that we would like to pursue in alignment with the A Place for Everyone strategic plan, such as rapid rehousing, homeless prevention, a shelter for women, and most significantly, a family shelter. While these initiatives are not included in the current budget, we are committed to directing funding towards these areas as additional resources become available throughout the year. The increase in affordable housing sales tax is a necessary step to ensure that we can continue to provide and expand essential services for affordable housing and homeless solutions. This increase will help us to sustain the progress we've made and address the pressing needs of our community in the years to come. Thank you for your attention and support as we work towards a community where everyone has safe and affordable housing.
Something large we throw about.
Can you please be quiet? We're all going to get a chance to speak, so if we could just be cognizant of everybody in here, really appreciate it. Thank you.
So that concludes the major departments where we're presenting. There's a number of slides contained in your packet that we've presented really to give a better feel for the rest of the budget and more information. But at this time, we're really wrapped up and ready to answer your questions and turn it over kind of to the public process and your consideration through the summer.
All right. With that, I'll open it up to questions from us.
Yeah, well, I'll start with one.
Okay.
Misty was just up here. So, does your budget include funding for the Lawrence Community Shelter? Misty?
This one.
Yeah, does your budget include funding for the community shelter?
Yes, it does.
Yes. Thank you.
See.
One more question for you, Misty. So, I noticed that you will be using special alcohol money. How was that money spent before? That might be a Craig, because I know we've used it for different things in the past, but it looks like all of it is potentially going to this budget. Is that correct?
I think that was a change that was made, I believe, last year for the first time. But before that, it was a special alcohol tax advisory board that will receive proposals from various community groups.
Yeah, that's what I remembered. I just want to make sure. That's all, Misty. Thank you.
Sure.
Allie, I have a couple of questions. I know you said next week you're going to produce, at least we'll know what the revenue neutral rate will be for the city.
Yes, and we have that. The county provided us with that number.
Oh, you do have it?
Yes.
Wonderful. What is that number?
1 second in my notes here.
Yeah, okay.
30.766.
Okay. And I don't know if you had time to calculate this. I did have this as a question. A couple of years ago, we had talked about the value of a mill. So like 1 mill equals so much of the budget. So do you know what that 1 mill equivalent is?
Yes. So just the straight value of a mill is 1,524,325.
Okay.
Now, what complicates that calculation slightly is we do factor in a 2% delinquency, so it lowers that to approximately 1493838.
149.
3838.
Switch to 2%. Okay. And then on our collected taxes, 9.3, our city portion is roughly 1.5, and that breakdown is roughly, is the 0.05 for affordable housing,
Yes.
and then
There's
roughly the 0.3 is what we are capturing for infrastructure.
Tony might know this more off the top of it. There's a 1% general purpose.
Yes.
As special sales tax is currently in the amount of 0.55%, 0.2% for the public transit system, 0.3% for public infrastructure and fire apparatus and equipment, and then 0.05% for affordable housing initiatives.
Okay.
In addition to that, we have a 1%
For the
general purpose sales tax.
and then
Do all of those renew? Do all of those have 10-year sunsets? I know transit and affordable housing does.
All of these, the three special sales taxes that I just summarized to you, those all went into effect on April 1 of 2019. So they continue for 10 years and will sunset on March 31 of 2029.
I had a quick question. Allie, this may not be for you. This might be more for Craig. We looked at code enforcement and the recommendations for that. I guess my question would be, I feel like this is a deja vu conversation because we went back and forth about this last year, and I'm not going to rehash old wounds. But based on the explanation that was given for wanting to increase code enforcement, can you go a little bit deeper into that? I mean, I understand being the more, not being reactionary, but being more on the offense than on the defense. But what does that look like from an operational standpoint? So I know we received your report a couple of months ago that looked at just some of the prohibiting offenses and things of that nature. So what I took from that report was that it was something more than just an FTE. It's more of an operationalization of how we do code enforcement. So I guess my question is, with the additional FTE, what are you hoping to see in code enforcement that will change, that will be impactful with this additional FTE?
I'll give a basic answer, and I know Jeff's available to answer follow-up questions, but it is just to advance that. It is to get into more of a proactive stance and to help property owners come into compliance with our basic code. This was one of the few places we were able to add because it's more or less revenue neutral. They will, through the fees or through the fines, that will probably cost recover their salary.
Okay. We can have a comment about that later on. And then my last question, at least for now, Lewis, I know you kind of came into this 60 days on the job, and I know we were looking at cost reductions. One of the things I feel like that's come up several years since I've been on the commission is just how we approach our community center, and that it's minimal in how it generates revenue as far as usage. And I want to say, I thought I saw something from you in regards to that, but just based on what we're doing in the market, is it because of our facilities? We don't feel like we need to add a cost to that. I know the idea was to keep it at zero to address equity amongst families. But as far as facilities and services and looking at your reduction, I just wanted to know your thoughts about that and looking at that piece of adding a cost or a fee to it.
Right. I mean, I think that's a reality that might be documented in our comp plan. Coming from other cities, I was surprised that there are no fees associated with it. And there are ways to work around that. You know, some sensible scholarship programs that really address those that are in need. So I hope that we can point to that comp plan as we develop in the future. And I believe the transmittal memo that city manager sent addressed that in the last few years, and that we should look at it. And I strongly believe that that would help us either reestablish, depending on when that happens. And I realize that there's history in the community and how they feel, and we certainly want to be sensitive to that. But I think it would definitely make a difference in the amount of services that we can continue to provide. Absent those, this is the reality of what we're looking at right now.
Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Liz.
Thank you.
That's probably mostly all of the direct questions I have for now, Mayor.
Okay. I had one related to Parks and Rec, if you keep coming back up. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Wanted to make sure. In regards to the list of parks, we're removing, equipment or, shelters or whatnot. I just wanted to reiterate, because I think I received this question, that we're not closing them. It would just...
No, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the only two that we decided that we might be impacted as far as closure or lesser maintenance are on the west side because of that full-time position. So this is not closing the parks. We'll continue to mow them. We'll continue to service them. It's just the amount that we budget for replacement every year would be one of those things we sacrifice at this point. Okay.
Question, while you're still there.
Yes, sir.
There is looking through all the funds, there's a special recreation fund. And someone, I'm not sure if you've been here long enough to answer the question, what's the special recreation fund? How's that funded, and what can it be spent on compared to general fund dollars?
Yeah, we did look into that, and it can be used to expand or maintain existing or parks or programs. So that is something that we will look at in the coming weeks to see where we can lower some of the impact. There's not sufficient money in there to cover all our cuts, but we will look to see what fund balance we need to maintain in there to stay within policy, and see where we can have the most impact by recouping some of those dollars, potentially moving those into operating costs and some of the things that are in our operating budget, in our general fund budget, out to that may not be allowable. For instance, part-time is not a good use of that money because we want to look at things that are one-time that are coming out of our operating. So we will be looking at those things to potentially minimize some of these recommendations that we're making at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One question for
Yes.
you. So when you're talking about removing some shelters and playgrounds, are you talking about once their lifespan is?
Yes, and some of those are nearing that already. So we have those identified. Again, they're not all in the same condition, but we've earmarked, okay, over the next 3 to 5 years, these are the ones that need to be replaced because of their condition. So we're talking about going along with that as removing and not replacing. Again, it's about $150,000 we have a year budgeted for those replacements, which is about what, either a shelter or playground costs, depending on especially in those smaller parks. So it's not, we're going in and removing them, January 1, 2025, but as they get to the point where they need to be removed either for safety or just deterioration, that would be the plan, and not replacing them at this point.
Okay. Then one final question about the Prairie Park situation.
Yes.
Possibly rehoming some of the animals. Why would we do that? Is it just a cost savings, or?
It's a cost saving. It does get expensive to feed some of those animals. So again, when trying to look at our service levels and our priority-based budgeting and how we can react to the needs to reduce some of the costs, that's what we're looking at. So it wouldn't be all the animals. It would be some that are more costly to keep in, fed and housed. And that may come on down the line. So we can look potentially at other ways of trying to not impact it in that severe manner. But the eventuality is if we're cutting down the supplies in the Prairie Park Nature Center, that would be one of the areas that we would be able to do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Question, but just a bit, was there any changes in the CIP from when we saw it last time to what's tonight? I know we're going to talk about the CIP several more times, but did we make any changes in the CIP from our last discussion?
There were some minor changes to airport and the state grant fund, and I believe if Melinda's on, she can explain that further.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm not sure I need, so those were the only two changes. We had talked about some other possible changes up here. Didn't give you any direction. I just didn't know if there was any other changes
Correct.
from last time. Okay.
Mayor, one more question for Chief Llewellyn. Say, Chief, so with the proposed reduction of 4 to 3, can you take me through what that looks like as it relates to recruiting classes and attrition with retirements and forced overtime? Because I know you tried to address that last year based on a 4-person station. Looking at that from a proposed 3, what does that look like? Those particular variables that I brought up.
Sure. So our current authorized staffing and operations is 150, and that includes captains, battalion chiefs, lieutenants, firefighters, engineers, all the ranks that serve in operations. What is in the proposed budget is a shift to an authorized force of 141 in operations, so a reduction from 150 to 141. Through attrition, we currently have 143 employees in operations. We're not going to lay people off on January 1. We're going to carry those folks until through natural attrition we get to 141. That that has a daily staffing or daily shift assignment of 47 firefighters to cover 36 spots. That is the taking into account the relief factor for 36 spots, we get to 47. So we haven't been there before. Even with the 5 added last year, we're still short of where we needed to be with the relief factor. So based on historical leave usage, that's the number that should be able to account for those spots. I'm not going to say that there's never going to be overtime, and depending on people's interest in working overtime, which has changed over the years. I'm not going to say there wouldn't be forced overtime, but that's our attempt to minimize the number of people who might be forced to work overtime, and that's truly impactful on our folks. I hear stories about people who missed kids' baseball games, and kids call them up and are crying because their parent wasn't at a baseball game, and it's troubling. So we are focused on putting the number of people in the workforce, or maintaining the number of people in the workforce who we believe, based on historic leave usage, are available to work on the shifts and will be there for the shifts.
Okay. So if we get to a point, we're at 143, but we get to a point of 141, then what number triggers us recruiting for another recruiting class? I mean, of course, with the addition of Station 6 and 7, but if then we're going to get back up into the 150s again for Station 6 and 7. So then how many recruiting classes would we need in between those timelines of opening to make sure we're up to that number?
Yeah, with the addition of Station 6, we anticipate that new number being 145 of authorized shift strength. And then with Station 7, that authorized shift strength would be 165. We'd add 4 when we opened Station 6, 4 FTEs, and we had 20 FTEs when we opened Station 7. Recruiting classes in 2028, when we anticipate opening Station 6, we will have a class. When we open Station 7 in 2030, we may have 2 classes, and that depends on the number of folks who we need to get into the system just to account for retirements or other attrition. I anticipate that there may be some recruit classes in between there because of the need to keep that level at 141. There's a concern, some concern stated that we've had difficulty hiring in the past, and I don't think we're alone in that. It's a challenge right now to get folks into fire department jobs. Public safety jobs don't have the allure, or don't attract the large candidate pool that they have in the past. We have very targeted recruiting. We have a recruiting team that goes out and hits events and talks to folks about LDCFM. And we anticipate continuing that targeted recruiting. We want people to come here because they want to work for LDCFM. We want folks to come here because this is a good spot to work.
And I know you talked about it being kind of a regional concern. Do you feel like on a state level, you're able to speak to the legislature about creating space to elevate workforce capacity building, and that I know that the state does that, with Level Up. They're hitting all of these different community colleges with 2-year programs in high need areas, and it seems like to me, since I've been on the commission, that there's been conversations around the need to recruit so that we remain competitive with just our state border partners. And so didn't know if there's at least some type of movement being done to include fire science into that Level Up program so that it pairs nicely with, I know Johnson County is the closest one I can think of that has that fire science program that someone can roll into that could be of a direct beneficial to this region and to us. So just thinking up top of mind as far as what are we doing or what could we be doing as an agency to speak to folks in Topeka about ensuring that there's also municipal jobs that need to be looked at and at least considered for things like this when we talk about retaining talent and youth in our state. So thank you for that, for answering that for me, Chief. That's all the questions.
I got a question.
Chief, while you're up there, you were talking about the overtime costs in general, and I was trying to drill into how much of the current overtime costs that we have, with your experience so far, is related to staffing the 4-person crew versus 3, as opposed to, say, special events or cases where people are out sick and just generally just need to be filling in for a spot that it's not tied to this particular proposal that you have in mind.
Let me talk about special events first, if I can kind of break that question up. We do staff for special events throughout the community, but a lot of that is at KU. A majority of that is at KU. And oftentimes, those may be mandatory overtime spots as well. Our commitment to serve the community extends to campus. We get reimbursed for that. And so the folks who are up there working, we bill for their actual rate plus an administrative fee. But that doesn't reduce the impact on the employees who are forced to be there. We are looking at alternatives, if you will, to maybe reduce the impact of that, looking for some partner agencies who might contribute personnel when our folks weren't available. I know on the law enforcement side, that's not uncommon to walk up to a KU game and see a police officer from Olathe or Kansas City, Kansas. So we are exploring those options to reduce the impact. It's just off the top of my head, I think about $170,000 worth of billing that is built into our revenue stream through providing EMS for those events. In terms of your other question, I'll try to answer it, but you might need to clarify a point or two. we currently have 4-person minimum staffing on our fire engines and quints. So when we drop below, when we don't have enough people to keep 4 people on those engines and quints, we staff for that. Recently, we experienced in the first probably 4 or 5 months of the year a significant impact on our overtime for a variety of factors. For example, the average number of people who have used the parental leave over the course of a year up until this year had been about 9 over the course of a year. We had 9 people on parental leave in the first quarter, and so that was very impactful to the budget as we were trying to get a recruit academy out and get that in place. So a lot of our staffing overtime is related to maintaining those staffing levels on current engines. Other impacts that we've experienced this year in particular was a very detailed and complex arson investigation that created a lot of overtime expense as we had our arson investigators working through that. That was another thing that was identified.
Okay, so percent-wise of the look at the overtime budget, whatever that number is, would you say, what percent would you say is tied to making sure we have 4 people on the quints and the engines?
I am just ballparking figures here.
Just a range would be great.
Sure, 75 to 80%.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, got a couple.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yep, I got 2. Could you talk a little bit about the proposal to go from 4 to 3 and how that compares to our surrounding communities?
Yeah, we have been looking into that. There's one peer community that has 4-person staffing on fire apparatus like we do, and that's Kansas City, Missouri. Some peer communities, there's 2 departments in Johnson County. Shawnee is one, and I believe Overland Park or maybe Olathe is the other one, who sometimes staff 4 people on an apparatus and other times staff 3 people. In apparatus, it's actually Overland Park. In apparatus, where they have a unit there by itself, it's staffed with 4 people. If it's there with another unit, such as a squad, it's staffed with 3 people. So other communities that are nearby that staff fire suppression apparatus with 3 members include Topeka, Lenexa, Olathe, a lot of the Johnson County departments, Kansas City, Kansas. Those are kind of the summary.
So we look at generally, what, about 15 different peer cities, somewhere in there? Is that what we compared to?
That was a list of about 12 peer cities.
Yeah, 12. And so only one actually does the 4 full-time.
Full-time, yeah.
And the rest of them are 3 or possibly every once in a while 4.
Correct.
Okay, got it. The other question I have is about overtime. So last year, our budget didn't include more staff for overtime, but you came forward, or as well as the fire union, I guess, came forward and asked for more positions to address the overtime issue. And so 5 positions were given to the fire department, new positions. So I was really surprised to see a few months ago where we had used up 88% of our overtime this year. Because we had allocated those positions, and I realize you've got to have time to fill those. And, you know, when I asked you last year, would this address your overtime issue, and you said yes. Now that we're getting staffed up, do you stand by that? That the 5 that we allowed you to have the money for, will that address the overtime issue?
The challenge that you identified was onboarding. So we hired 4 extra people at the start of the year. That was one of our challenges with getting folks on board. We needed 8 people to hire for attrition purposes, and 5 people for to fill those extra spots that we were given. We were low on folks, and we ended up being able to hire 12 of those positions. So the time to get those folks onboarded, as well as the other impacts I talked about, the family leave that came out, the the arson investigation impacted significantly the amount of overtime that we had per the budget. The onboarding of firefighters is expensive. The academy is expensive. We put folks through the academy internally, and we have to assign people to the academy, which increases overtime usage because we have to then backfill for the folks who are assigned to the academy. So the answer is we were getting there. We were getting to a point where we could address the that issue. We've had some attrition again this year, and we're in the process, or we would be in the process of starting to talk about hiring 7 to get back up to full staffing. So, and that includes 6 people through attrition and the 1 spot, if you will, that we weren't able to hire for the first academy. So one of the challenges with fire service is staffing, is the peaks and valleys that we see. And we were in a valley, got to almost the peak, and we're in a valley again. So we'd be talking about the need to hire again to get to full staffing to minimize that overtime. So we were close.
So it's not a matter of needing more positions, it's just keeping those filled. Is that what I understand?
Correct.
So if you were able to do that with the additional 5 that were added during the last budget season, then do you feel comfortable in saying that would address your overtime issues?
It would be close. I talked about the relief factor earlier, and if we look at the number of folks that we need to maintain on a 39 minimum daily staffing, with the relief factor, we need to be at about 152 authorized, and we were at 150. So we were pretty close. If we could hire people and put them into the system, January 1, welcome to LDCFM. Here's your gear. There's your bunk. Here's your truck. It would be a lot easier to manage that. But the peaks and valleys create challenges.
Yeah, it's never clear, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Chief, I had an additional question regarding 4 versus 3 man staffing or person staffing. So in any scenario or any situation that you've seen, it sounds like a lot of the 3-person staffing units in Johnson County or in Johnson County proper, and they're surrounded by other cities. So if they needed folks, they're able to respond quickly. Are you able to, would response times be affected in our case, since we're not necessarily an island, but, we have a couple municipalities that aren't abutting us?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's no doubt our service levels will be reduced when we go from 4-person to 3-person. We have identified critical taskings for all the different types of calls that we go to. And from those critical taskings, we've identified what we call an effective response force. So if we go to a fire in a house, we may need to force entry in the house. We may need to hook up to a fire hydrant. We're going to need to take a hose line into the house. We're going to need to perform what we call search and rescue to look for victims in the house. We're going to need to ventilate it to let the smoke out. All of those tasks take people, and we've identified the number of people that we need at that incident in order to accomplish those tasks in a timely manner, in a manner that makes a difference, that meets what our goal is, what our KPI is to confine the fire to the room of origin. If we're showing up with fewer people on fire apparatus, we're going to need to call more apparatus to the incident in order to get the right number of people there. They may be coming from further away, so it's going to take longer for us to assemble that effective response force, and that's going to be one of the impacts. And it's not just fires. We've critical tasked responses to cardiac arrest, which is another KPI that we follow, and we currently send 7 people to a cardiac arrest event. In order to get 7 people now, it's going to take multiple, or at least 1 more apparatus. That's a fire engine. That's an ambulance and a battalion chief, and we would need to add an apparatus to that response. So it will have an impact in terms of how we deliver people to the incident and the length of time that it takes to get everybody at the incident that we need. You guys?
Do you need 7 people? I mean, I'm not an EMT, obviously.
Yeah.
Please help me understand.
I'd be happy to put on a demonstration of what we do for cardiac arrest, but some of the tasks for a cardiac arrest are get the patient to an area where you can work on them. People collapse in tight places. We have to get them out to where they're at. We have to start CPR. We have to hook up the defibrillator. We have to start an IV. Someone has to talk to the family. The family's there. They need to be talked through what's going on, or bystanders. And then assuming we get the patient back, best case scenario, we need those people to move the patient onto the gurney, and they're still hooked up to all the equipment that they've been hooked up to. So essentially what we do is, in the case of a cardiac arrest, we bring an emergency room to the patient. And if you've ever been in the hospital and seen a cardiac arrest in the hospital, there's a lot of folks in that little space. And that's what we're bringing. And then we have to move them to the hospital. So we're moving all the equipment and the patient as well out to the ambulance and down the road. So that number of folks, surprisingly, it may surprise you, is the least number that we sent of the last two departments, or compared to the previous two departments I worked for.
All right, that helps. Thank you. Can I ask one more question?
Sure, Vice Mayor.
So I want to make sure I'm clear then. You're the chief of the fire department, and I'm going to rely on your expertise on certain matters I have zero understanding of, and I've done my own research, which is always dangerous on others, but got a lot of feedback from people. One of the biggest questions that I have is, from a fire insurance rating standpoint, from a life safety standpoint, and from a realistic coverage and real world cost, what are the unintended consequences of moving from 4 to 3? And I think you've obviously thought through that, because you're the one that proposed this to us and to the city manager, from what I understand. So there's a reduction in service, you said. Does that mean that we're going to see reductions in our core values when it comes to being rated for fire protection and for insurance ratings? And does this manpower shift, which sounds like it's prevalent in other areas, is it going to have a negative impact on our rating, specifically due to this decrease in staffing on these apparatus? And are there other ways to get these metrics up? For example, if they're evaluating us and our training and our education and our continuing education, and how staff looks and how they feel and their general wellness, are there other ways to improve our rating based on that if we did move this direction?
Sure. And if you'll please allow me, I think I would like to clarify that I am in favor of 4-person staffing.
Okay.
So it's more efficient. It's delivering a better product to the community. It helps us improve our strategic goals. So I just want to be clear on that.
Okay.
The potential impacts to ISO rating, for example, when ISO looks at us, we get a score for staffing levels. That's where our 4-person staffing helps us. This will impact that score. We also get a score for what's called dispersion, and that's looking at the number of stations and how they're located in the community. ISO recommends that you have a fire engine within 1.5 miles of each part of the community, and a ladder truck within 2.5 miles. So we did not get a very good score for dispersion last time, and I think that's a recognition of the community outgrowing the footprint of the fire department. So as part of this plan, we are adding fire stations, so those points may offset the decrease that we're going to see from staffing decreases.
But do you think so? You don't think it's the same level of safety?
I think from the ability to provide service, the 4-person staffing is a more efficient staffing model. There's studies that have been conducted by the federal government, or federal government funded studies done by independent research bodies that have shown the efficiencies afforded by 4-person staffing. We're going to lose that efficiency. It's going to impact our ability to function at fires in a way that we're focused on through our strategic plan KPI. We look to and measure our ability to confine fires to the room of origin. This may slow us down. We're not going to be able to send crews in right away when we show up if we don't have the right number of people on scene. So it will impact us in that way for sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any,
I have one question for Ally. So, if done with Fletchies. Just so I know, what is the percentage, you talked about the sales tax, what are we projecting for the increase in property values or valuation in 2025?
About 7%.
7%.
Yeah, 7.5%, I believe.
It's to 3% on sales tax?
Correct.
Thank you.
and Ally, just for my clarification, what's that? I was kind of looking at it as well. I think for the last, was it like 5 or 6 years, it's been at least 4%, like valuations I've seen, or could you confirm?
No, since COVID, we've seen extremely high.
Higher than that.
Last year, I believe it was 8, and the year before that was 12.
Okay.
And I'd have to go back farther than that.
It's skyrocketed.
Yeah.
Okay. I was looking at earlier data then. Thank you. Any additional questions?
Well, not right now, sir.
All right. Before I open it up to public comment, I just want to let you know that we have a lot of staff here, and we'll be looking back at what folks say, and we'll try to compile that information as best we can so that, folks can look back on it and hopefully have as many of their questions answered as possible. So, all right.
Take a break.
Oh, you need a break? Okay. Sorry. Bio break for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and start public comment.